Welcome back to Remote Work Bay. I have Leslie all the way from Paris with us today. Leslie, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I guess I should start by telling you I'm from Texas. Went to the University of Texas in Austin, and then pretty much after that moved to New York for 5 years. I came back for a short stint in Texas, and then that actually led to a 100% remote job in the United States, which led to then me traveling abroad, and I found myself in Europe for the past couple of years.
I know, what a whirlwind of a year for everything that's going on right now. And I know the last time we chatted, you were launching new markets for Lime. What's going on with the rideshare and scooter companies now?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting time. Obviously, I think for those companies, I no longer work at Lime, but it's been interesting to watch the scooter share space, as we called it for the last couple of years, really evolve. And it's with COVID now, it's going to be really, really interesting, I think, to see people are looking for a way to get to and from places that are not around other people. So obviously not on the bus or in the subways. And these scooters do offer that open air, single person type transport, even more different than say an Uber where you're enclosed with another person in the actual car. So I think it's really interesting. We'll see what happens. I think the biggest test is going to be when companies are actually having all of their employees back, particularly in the United States, and really trying to get to public transport or make that entire commute trip. Do people feel comfortable doing that with scooters? And then even just living here in Paris, I can say I think the next front on that, where there's a ton of bike lanes and the infrastructure is actually here in Paris, and it's quicker to go by scooter than it is by car. If you want to avoid the subway, you're going to take a scooter or a bike. So it's been really interesting to see from the US, where I think, we weren't really using any micro mobility devices at the time, to where we're probably a little bit further ahead in Europe. And now people are truly buying like these scooters, and I hear friends asking about what kind of model should I buy and what are the features that I'm concerned about, kind of similar how do we talk about like a car. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, I think.
Do you foresee these companies having to pivot at all, considering what's going on? Living in LA, I've been seeing fewer and fewer scooters. So I don't know what the difference is in Europe and the US markets. Do you know what's going on in the two markets and how different they are?
That's a fair point. So I think one of the things that you're going to see is probably consolidation. So you're not going to see the days of, I think it was a year or two ago at this point, but you would have 8 companies. You'd have to have 8 different apps to be able to use whichever scooter is on the street. And so just talking about app fatigue is very difficult for consumers to download all of these apps, put your credit card into every one of them. I think there has to be consolidation. I think you're seeing cities already do that. So a lot of cities said, hey, we don't want all of these scooters everywhere. We want it to be controlled and, in parking stations or parking spots, which is what they do here in Paris. And by the way, we're only going to allow 3 operators, not 8. So I think you're definitely seeing that around the world, particularly in Europe. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more consolidation. So you've seen kind of the Uber Lime integration. The Jump bikes are now available on the Uber app as well.
And how have these companies, kept it COVID friendly? Considering so many people are touching the scooters, like what are some protocols that you guys have?
So I think that's going to be a key consideration for consumers is, can you convince them that the scooters are clean enough to use, and share with other people, especially in this shared scooter space. Mm-hmm. So I've seen different approaches. There's a few companies out there that I think are offering gloves, but how do you ensure there are enough gloves for everybody? There's definitely a lot of reminders when you pull up these apps on make sure you wash your hands frequently, make sure you're using the hand gel whenever you're entering a shop, or maybe bring your own gloves to use for the scooter. So there's definitely a variety of ways that they're trying to encourage cleanliness and the sanitization. Maybe in the winter, if people aren't opposed to it and they're wearing gloves anyway, that's actually a better time to use the scooters when it's colder outside. So we'll have to see what happens.
I hope these companies stay afloat, because I definitely use the scooter very often, even in LA, and I'm sure it's even more in Europe, because there's so many walking cities.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about, where you've been in the last few years. How has remote work been in Europe and in the Middle East slash Africa? I mean, the last time I saw you was basically exactly a year ago in Lebanon. And I know you were launching South African market at the time for Lime. How have you been in the last year and where have you been?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was thinking about, too, even the evolution of work from home, because I currently work 100% of the time now from home, as most people do. And I was thinking about when I first started my career, my very first job, we called it remote work, but it was crazy. We actually used our personal computer to log into a bunch of VPNs and all that kind of stuff to then remote into our work computer, which was a laptop, but it was so bulky and heavy that we never carried it outside of the office. So you could remote into your work laptop, but it was slow. It really had like a lag when you were moving the mouse around and everything. It was a miserable experience. So you really didn't feel like it was easy to just go and log on and do something. It was really, really a pain. And many times it's actually easier to run into the office to get that done than to remote into your computer. Fast forward to today, now like you're talking about, not only are we doing remote work 100% from computers, and it's not that kind of logging in and controlling the computer remotely, but like now we can actually go to other countries. And so I think for sure I've crossed the spectrum to the other side where everything can pretty much be done from the computer. Now I was taking the work at that point to these places in the Middle East, in Africa, and it still is fascinating how far we can now go to these other countries, work remote. And I think some other countries have even done a better job of making sure Wi-Fi is in a lot of places, especially countries that didn't rely on the cell data, or cell data is very expensive. So in some ways, it can even be easier to work in some of these other countries because you always have a Wi-Fi connection. But it's been incredible, this evolution in my own life, my own work and career, on going from the early remote days to now what it looks like.
Right. And how did you end up in Paris?
So I've been living in Netherlands for the last couple of years, and I am on my way back to the United States. But obviously, it's been a little bit nicer this summer. Our summer was very different in Europe, thankfully. And so there's some concerns, as like everybody has, about I would be seeing my parents again, and so I want to make sure they're safe. And so we're just trying to figure out what's the best place for me in the US. So no rush to go back. So I figured I'd stop in Paris and enjoy a few months here.
How are they handling COVID out in France?
So I'm sure you guys have seen our numbers are not great now. So we are solidly in our second wave. We are currently under a curfew. So from the hours of 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., we do need to stay in the house, with very few exceptions as to why you would be allowed out after curfew. So that is the biggest one. That one just started Saturday. And I think before that, during the summer, people really took their vacations. Vacation is really held in high regard here in France. And so they made sure, the government, to say to go ahead and take your vacations, and that's fine. And I think this summer you saw from Instagram and a lot of social media, a lot of Europeans were traveling. So all over, a lot of the familiar places, sunny places, warm places. And what they started seeing, especially in France, in the south of France, is that the cases started to rise there right after kind of August holidays. So it's not surprising. It's been this, it's over the last several weeks, it's just been rising. And then all the major cities, as people return to Paris and some of the other Lyon and big cities, the case numbers started to rise there as well. So unfortunately, now we're back in a situation where our case numbers are, I think, on a per capita basis, actually much higher than most parts of the US. The hospitals are filling up again. So there is a lot of pressure to see if we can stem this wave. And everyone talks about the shutdown and the lockdown. I think it was known worldwide. It was one of the harshest lockdowns, with you weren't allowed to leave unless you had a piece of paper saying you could be in the streets. And so most people here are a bit nervous that we are going to enter a second lockdown. So we'll see. So
do you get fined if you go out after curfew?
Yes. So this one, I believe it's around like 150 euros for your first offense. The second offense is in the thousands. So you're highly incentivized to make one mistake, learn from it, and don't do it again.
That's so crazy. I don't know if you've been following California, but yeah, we had a couple of curfew days as well, because, the city had to clean up the streets because of all the the looting and rioting. So we had a week of curfew where it started at like 5 or 6 p.m. And in like the nicer parts of town, like
Oh, wow.
Beverly Hills, they started at 1 p.m. It was so insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I did hear that. I thought those numbers were incorrect at 1 p.m. I thought it must be 1 a.m., but wow.
Yeah, 1 p.m. It's for like Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, all the really nice neighborhoods because they were just, I mean, during all the rioting back in the summer, like
Yeah.
so many of those stores, even on Rodeo Drive, they were looted. So they had to clean up that whole mess.
Yes, I
That's
saw
the reason
them.
why. It was so crazy. So, I mean, have you seen violence out in Europe as well, or is it just a US thing?
No, I mean, I think the world is paying attention, of course, the United States. At the time the Black Lives Matter protests started, they were absolutely support protests in Netherlands, where I was at the time. There was a lot of great exhibitions in the museums focusing on Black artists and the role that particularly Africans have played within Europe's history. So there was a lot of acknowledgement, I believe, of what was going on in the United States. And there were some protests that we don't have the type of, I think, looting that you guys saw in the United States more recently, but definitely a lot of different protests. And then within France, there's quite a few protests, and there's other issues within France that a lot of people are protesting. There was actually the pickup again of the Yellow Jackets protest that started up again as well. So, but that's not anything, I think, stranger to France's usual living situation. So.
Right. Yeah. It just seems like the whole world is on an uprising right now. So in their
Yeah.
own little pockets of uprising. But hopefully it simmers down, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in November, especially in the United States. Are you able to vote from
Yeah.
France? Is it like a mail-in ballot?
Yes. So yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I'm registered to vote in Texas, or fortunately, however you view it. We will see, but it is one of the tougher states to get approved to do mail-in voting. So I know I have a lot of friends that are in California and New York who have been able to easily vote by mail, and it hasn't been an issue. For me, I sent in my request on September 17th. I never received a response. I had to call the elections office. They claimed they never got my request to vote by mail. So I had to send it again, and it was a lot of waiting. And they finally approved it, and they finally sent it last Friday. So I was getting nervous that I wasn't going to be able to vote just because of the requirements in Texas. But ultimately we got it sorted, and I am sending in my ballot actually tomorrow morning. So very excited.
Awesome. Okay. I'm so glad that you're able to vote, because I wonder how it works when you're living internationally. So they sent it to you in Paris, your ballot?
Yep. So you can actually request by email. So my problem was that they hadn't received the email, or didn't approve me as being, legitimately abroad, and that I needed to vote by mail. And so they hadn't approved me for that. But what's great is that you can get this ballot then, once that's approved, sent to you by email. So you print it and then you mail it. It's been really good that they can do it by email for sure this year. And it's my first time ever voting absentee, I believe. So yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I've never been out of the country during election time, so this is like interesting information for me as well. And I
voted the last election. Oh, I was going to say the last election I voted, and I left the country, I think the next day, like the day before. No, I early voted and then I left. And so when the election results hit, I was abroad, and I was very
yeah, you've been gone.
a very tough time.
How long have you been gone for now? You've been gone for a while.
Yeah, I've been, I've been officially living abroad for a couple of years now. And then before that, obviously, I love to travel a lot, which is why I think we ended up going to Lebanon together, which is very cool.
Right. And how long do you stay in one city or country normally?
So that has changed a lot. That's probably what's changed the most for sure before COVID and after COVID for me. So my prior job required me to constantly be on the move. The most I would probably stay in one place was 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and at least taking a trip somewhere else. Sometimes it was a few countries a week that I needed to go to. So it was a lot of travel. So since then, obviously, I think there's been a big shift to longer stays, enjoying one place longer. And so besides the move from Netherlands to Paris recently, I've generally tried to stay in one place a little bit longer And I haven't gotten on a plane. I think it's been 3 plane flights since March, I think I've done. So definitely looks a lot different than what I used to do before.
That's very few for you. Very, very few.
For me, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
so
I think for you as well. You went to Mexico recently, didn't you?
I did. I just got back from Cabo, and it was my first international trip since March, and it was so great. It was only a 2-hour
How
flight.
did you feel?
I felt much safer actually down in Mexico than in California. I mean, they were so diligent. I mean, walking into a grocery store, they had a guard outside, temperature check. Everyone had temperature check. To wash your shoes, you go through these giant like full body sanitization machines that like spray you down, and then they force you to like basically wash your hands before you can go into the store. So that's definitely not a thing in the
Wow.
US. I really wish we had
No.
those like machines to wash your whole body, but I don't know. I think we're just so divided in the US. I mean, we could barely get our
Hmm.
counties and our cities within California to be safe and wear masks. So it's just really, really different
Yeah.
in the States and Mexico. And
Okay.
I'm waiting to go back. But it's interesting because, because we live in the US, so many countries have essentially banned the US from traveling to their countries right now because we're so high risk.
Yeah.
It must be interesting, like for you to travel
Yeah.
with a US passport. Do you get, I mean, for the 3 times you traveled, did they extra screen you? How is that process like?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something they kind of pay attention to. So, I mean, right now, if you're not a resident of Europe, you shouldn't be traveling around Europe. So that's actually, it varies by country. But like, for example, Italy is a country that you cannot be visiting as a tourist technically if you're not a European resident. So I know I've heard some stories about people doing a quarantine in another country as an American and then coming into the Schengen or EU region. So like within Italy, when I was leaving Italy, I was asked to present my residence permit for the Netherlands, which I had. And so I was able to show that, but they were very adamant that I show that before they issued a ticket to me, even though I was already at the airport. I could show that I had been in Italy for a long time, about a month at that point. So they were very strict about it. And you get a lot of questions on the tours. Oh, you're from the United States. How did you get in? There's definitely a level of concern that you saw among the citizens, just in terms of, like you were talking about, the infection rate.
Yeah.
Where did you come from? Did you do the quarantine? And then explaining I haven't actually been in the United States since January 3rd, I think, or something of this year. They get it, but it was definitely something that they pay attention to.
Interesting. So you don't recommend Americans to be traveling to Europe right now because there's like a couple of places that won't even let us in.
Really going to be, again, case dependent on where you're wanting to go, how comfortable you feel. As far as I know, for Americans, I think it's like the Czech Republic or England. The thing is that like you cannot come into the Schengen region right now. And so the Shenzhen is the most popular, I think, and most well-known region that Americans tend to travel to. But definitely like shouldn't be coming to a third country outside of the Shenzhen zone thinking you're going to get into the Shenzhen zone. I have not met anyone that has, come here on a train in Europe for some period of time and has a residence visa.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, I know that Turkey and Croatia are allowing people in, or Americans in, as well as Mexico. So my friends that are avid travelers are in one of those 3 places right now. Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you gone back there, like Croatia or Turkey, since COVID started?
No, my plan was to stay within the Shenzhen region since the borders are closed anyway. And so that's what they're trying to do. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll stay here and definitely enjoy it. It has been really, really nice. It's horrible for a lot of the businesses that were based solely, especially on tourists. But it has been really nice to enjoy Amsterdam without the crowds. I went to the Eiffel Tower to go see it a few weeks ago, and there was no wait. They shut down several of the entrances because there was no one coming in. It was completely empty.
Right. And it's, I mean, similar situation in LA. I mean, traffic has really died down a lot because we're all working from home. So like the one thing that people don't like about LA, well, it's there's not so much of that anymore. So that's great.
Yeah.
right? So I wanted
Very
to ask,
true.
when you're traveling around Europe and you're hopping, before you're hopping every couple of weeks to another country, did you Airbnb? Did you hotel? Like, where did you stay and where did you work?
It's a great question. Because I used to be all about, I still am. I love the points game and the hotels within the chains and that kind of thing. But when you're in a place, especially for longer than a few days, and you don't have the extra room, or you can't make your own meal, or you can't do your own laundry, that was really tough. So I actually started to move more towards the longer term rentals. So a mix of Airbnbs, and then there's these platforms that are offering long-term rentals for primarily business travelers, and they're a bit more higher price, but they have beautiful furnishings. They come with everything that you need. You still just show up with your suitcase and your clothes, basically, and they kind of provide everything else, and it's all done, managed through an app. And I really, really like that. It was able to kind of give me some grounding and a home away from home. It really felt like a place, if I made friends, that I could invite people over and have a dinner, or just hang out on the weekends and relax and watch some TV and things like that. So it really was very nice to have that. Whereas I feel like in a hotel, you do still always know when you're in the hotel, you're on a trip, you're still traveling, and that can be kind of unsettling if you're in a place for so long. So that was really, really nice. I really loved those kinds of companies. I know they're kind of struggling now, but I think it's a really interesting proposition that they have, and the prices are now really quite affordable. It used to be definitely above, market rent in these cities because they were offering a furnished place for a short-term stay, and now you can rent it out. I mean, some of these companies, I've seen them, they're renting them year long, and it's pretty much market price and you get it furnished, and which is really nice. So it's a really interesting time, like what they're going to do with all that inventory. But I loved staying in that for anything longer than a few days. I love staying in those types of places.
Yeah, you definitely need to have like a laundry unit. Even when I was in Cabo for 2 weeks. I mean, so initially I was supposed to be in Cabo for a week, and I enjoyed it so much.
Okay.
I extended it another week, and there was, I was staying at the Nobu Hotel, and there's no washer dryer. So, like every night here I'm like scrubbing my swimsuit, washing my clothes. It's like, it's just like, if you're going to stay for a longer amount of time, like I feel like that's so crucial just to be able to.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Is the Nobu Hotel related to the restaurant Nobu?
Yeah. So it's,
okay.
I think Nobu has a couple of hotels around the world. They just opened one in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
They have one in Las Vegas. They have like a really, really expensive one in Malibu in LA. And so the Cabo Nobu just opened last November. So they're not even a year old. It's brand new.
Wow.
It's so beautiful. I mean, I would love to stay there longer, but I mean, that's like the one thing that if we had is like some type of, laundry machine, because that's like the one thing that I needed while I was out there.
Yeah.
And like you said, the kitchen. It's nice to not have room service every day.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, exactly. I've never cooked in my life and had to do that. And so now I actually enjoy it and making my own meals.
Right. And how about your office situation? Are you just hopping from co-working space to another, or are you just working from home completely now?
Yeah, so I went ahead and actually rented a place here in Paris just to be around other people, especially if we got confined again. I figured I'm going to spend a lot of time there anyways. So I'll be out here in the co-working spaces. And it's been really, really interesting. So I know in Netherlands, like quite a few people returned back to work pretty early on, but there were definitely co-working spaces throughout the city that were completely booked. You couldn't get a spot. And they were putting in some social distancing requirements as well. So capacity was down. Generally in the last, say 2 weeks, it's really started to empty out a bit. So you can tell offices have told their employees they can start to work from home entirely. You'll see like half the team in sometimes in some of these offices. The other thing that's happened is most of the people I know in Paris go to work. Or they'll do a rotation schedule of 3 days on, 2 days off type thing.
Got it.
They do require that if you're not in an office alone, that you're wearing a mask, even during work hours. So now it's 100% of the time, unless you're literally eating or drinking something, your mask should be on. And some people have gotten really used to it. I think it's definitely a little bit of kind of, you get to pick, I think, with most employers if you really don't feel comfortable coming in. But otherwise, it feels a bit more normal. At least I know my friends in the United States have not returned to work. And a lot of them have had, notices saying they're not returning to work till next March or June or July even. So I think that's quite different in Europe. It was very quick to get back to the office.
I feel like it's also easier to manage a country that's much smaller. Whereas like the US is this giant country with so many different people and so many different ideas. It's, like I was saying, it's so hard to just even manage like county from county, and like a state like California.
Absolutely.
So it's way easier for France to handle their entire country and put these mandatory rules.
Absolutely.
But that's good. I mean, it's good because you're able to like, flatten that curve and keep everybody safe. So I'm glad that you're safe out there. But I know you were telling me too that you've switched jobs now from launching like limes in all over Europe. Like, what are you doing now?
So I've started a new gig. I'm working in the real estate space back in the United States. So it is for a company in the US. And so focusing on the new housing market, that's definitely, it's doing really well. And so we're involved in that. I'm brand new, so I'm not able to speak too much about it, but it's been interesting to definitely read up on the trends and see what's happening in the housing market in the US right now.
And are you just working remotely in Paris or for the US company, or do they have a branch out there?
Nope. So I'm working right now just 100% for a US-based role, and with the intention, of course, that I'm coming back soon to the United States. We just haven't picked a date yet. The company's been really great about being flexible and letting people work from wherever they're currently based.
And do you have to work US hours while you're out in Paris?
Yep. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, is that I'm working a mixture. It's kind of a hybrid. So I'm working obviously a lot later here in Paris than I would maybe in the US. So that way I can overlap a lot of time with my team. But I'm definitely having some issues sleeping at night because I am staying up so late. And even if I stay up late and then a couple hours, like at 2 a.m., I'm trying to go to bed, I, for whatever reason, cannot fall asleep till 4. So that wasn't an issue before. So I didn't think it was going to be this hard to manage the hours, but we'll see. I'm hoping it's just kind of an adjustment period. But yeah, right now I'm working US hours.
I totally feel you. I was pre-COVID, I was in Hong Kong in February and I was working full time. I didn't take any time off. I was just working remotely. And that time difference is insane. I think Hong Kong is 16 hours ahead of Pacific Standard Time. So I started working at midnight Hong Kong time every single day.
Oh my God.
All the way up until like 6 or 7 in the morning. And then I would sleep all morning and wake up, do a little bit work and then hopefully see the city for a little bit. But it's pretty tough. It's like working night shifts.
It's very tough.
Every single night.
No, and that's why I actually would love to go to Mexico, because I think it's kind of a bunch of things where it's a bit cheaper and the dollar goes really far there. You have great options in terms of luxury and all of that. And then you also are on the same time zone. So that's huge, huge, huge. I didn't value it as much before, definitely now. And I would love to go to Hawaii, but I couldn't do the reverse where I have to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. to start working, East Coast time. So it's better in Europe, but like you said, Asia is so difficult. And then going the other way, I can't wake up early. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm glad I'm a night owl, but even as a night owl, it's pretty intense to flip your schedule around.
No, that's really.
I mean, and basically wake up at 1 or 2 p.m. in the day to start my day.
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah, and I always feel like I'm behind because I'm waking up so late. So.
Yeah, exactly. What time is it in France right now?
It is 8:39.
Okay, cool. So it's not like super, super late yet. But you're in a co-working space right now, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do co-working spaces open all day for people?
It depends. So I belong to an international one, so that one is very popular with Americans. So they're open 24 hours. As long as you have your key card, you can go to your building. But a lot of the co-working spaces in France do not open 24 hours, and they close usually around 7 or 8 at the latest.
Wow, got it. Yeah. So I mean, That's pretty early, actually.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think it's pretty early, but I think the assumption is definitely that people will go to dinner and you shouldn't be at the office 24/7. If you need to do something, you'll do it from home. So,
yes, I miss the French lifestyle where you take like 3 hour lunch.
yes.
Oh my gosh. And do you have a lot of friends out there now that you've been there for a little bit?
I do, but they do tend to be mostly expat friends. And I mean, even the expats, almost all of them, I think, speak French at a conversational level. So
Uh,
I do not. So that's been nice because when I'm with them, they take care of everything.
yeah.
But definitely is not helping my French, and that it's a lot of, well, obviously I speak in English. So
Right.
yeah, it's been very cool to meet definitely a lot of people here for a lot of different reasons. A lot of women here, so it was really easy to like join a women's group and make some female friends, and so that's been really cool. Yeah, and the fact that I mean we're not in lockdown, so still being able to meet them for a coffee or a drink has been quite easy to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I would assume you had to do that in most of the countries you were at in Europe when you were launching market. I mean, you probably had someone local on the ground to help you with business, right?
No, so a lot of times we were actually the only person on the ground or only person as part of my team. And so that was definitely really tough being the only
Wow.
person on the ground. And especially as an American, sometimes we were in areas that like were not as popular with tourists. So we weren't always around, go to different events and meet both locals who are interested in meeting expats and then expats who have lived there for a while and offer a lot of tips. And I know there's like some Facebook groups too that were really helpful, especially with women and traveling solo and those kinds of things. So it's been really cool to see like how we can actually use some of the social media for good, because I know there's a lot of bad that can come out of social media, it seems like. So that was really cool because I had never actually used that when I was, when I first started backpacking. Like we never used, of course, social media to meet other people. It was always in the hostels and that kind of thing. So this was much more like grown up and business type meetings, but it was really great to have friends to be able to do things with.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. Especially like, I mean, like whenever I travel, I love meeting locals because you get a completely different perspective on the city or
Totally.
country you're in. So, I like, what did I use? I used to use couch surfing, pre all of these like Airbnb groups and all these like you said, social
Yeah.
media groups, because that's like the only way for you to meet people. But now it's a little bit easier. But again, it's
Yeah.
with COVID, it's probably harder now as well.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, so interesting. I mean, so since you've been so well traveled, I mean, let's talk about pre-COVID. What are probably
Sure.
your top three places that you've traveled to in the last couple of years while you've been out of the U.S.?
The last couple of years would have been my favorite.
Mm,
One of my top, of course, is South Africa.
yeah.
I think it's incredible. I've only been to the Cape Town Western region, Western Cape region. So I haven't even explored other parts of South Africa, but that alone, you could spend months just seeing everything there. Incredible place. So that was for sure one of my favorite places. I really came to have a deep appreciation for Amsterdam as well. And I don't think I appreciated it as much as until I moved to Paris. Just the simplicity of getting around, getting kind of life set up there. It's an extremely efficient country. It is a small country, but extremely efficient, and everyone speaks English and people are quite friendly. And then being able to see it, when it was kind of a smaller city, they call it like basically a big village. Being able to see it during COVID with, less people and what it kind of was probably 15 years ago, it's so charming. It's awesome to see. So that was another place I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, I love both those. They're so different. Both Cape Town and
Yeah.
Amsterdam are so different. And I want to spend more time in both those places. I think when I traveled there, I was only there for a couple of days. But, to live
Yeah.
there for a longer amount of time, I'm sure you were able to integrate more into the city life and the culture out there and meet more people.
Yeah, and it's very different than I think what people come to Amsterdam for. There's a certain image of Amsterdam that people tend to have. I'm going to go see this, this, and this. And of course, when you're living there, you don't actually, you avoid those places like Times Square. As a New Yorker, you don't go to Times Square because that's not interesting. So it's very similar, I think, in Amsterdam. And the life outside of that tourist bubble and all of that is really actually, it's so great. It's a really, really awesome place. And there's so many great things to see outside of even the city center that I didn't realize are so close by. And obviously it's easy to get everywhere with a bike. So that was a really, really cool experience for sure.
Well, I got to go back. It's like,
yes,
I travel again.
Possible.
I was like making my way around the Middle East and Eastern Europe before COVID happened. And I'm like, oh man, I got to get back there. Like,
what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen with the travel bans? Like, I thought for sure the travel ban on Europe would be over by now. What's your thought on like when they're going to lift?
You know, I really don't know because, you know, similar to what's happening in Europe right now, US hasn't even had the second and third wave. So once, you know, the fall and like winter really hits, I feel like those numbers are going to shoot back up. And so maybe next spring or summer. I mean, that's my guess. My guess is spring or summer, just because, you know, like the whole reason why Europe has banned Americans is because our numbers are so high. And I just don't see them going down unless we find a cure for it, or like some type of vaccine. But even then, like, I mean, say we come up with a vaccine by the end of the year, to mass produce it is going to take time. So I'm guessing closer to summer, you know. So, but what I do think what will happen is I think people won't completely ban Americans. Like, I think what's going to happen is they're going to slowly start opening it up, but requiring the 14-day quarantine, which is what they're doing in Asia. So I can't travel to Asia.
Okay.
You have to quarantine for 14 days.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I think. But
you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to do a COVID test or anything for Mexico. That was okay when you went there?
Yeah, not at all. Okay. I mean, they do temperature checks when you get to the airport. They make you fill out this extra form. And like I said, every single business, restaurant, hotel, supermarket, they take your temperature and go through this like process to even go into the store. So I think they're pretty diligent in at least the nicer touristy areas. I don't know how it's like outside of, you know, the city, but while I was there in Cabo, I felt really, really safe. Yeah. So,
and even I think if you came to Europe, you would generally feel pretty safe because we're wearing masks everywhere. Maybe the social distancing is a bit more lax sometimes, but definitely the masks are everywhere.
Right. I mean, it's honestly going to be the new norm for the next year. So we just got to embrace it.
Crazy.
No, totally got to embrace it. But I'm so glad you're safe out there. And please let me know when you come back to the US, and I'll definitely try to touch base with you.
Absolutely.
And see you. Are you going to go to Texas first when you come back?
Yeah, that's the plan. Is I think we'll probably be going to Texas, possibly New York, but it seems like, you know, Texas might be the better place right now to be. So yeah, TBD for sure.
Okay. Well, keep me posted. And thank you so much for taking time to be a part of my podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'll talk to you again soon. Message me when you're back in the US.
Okay, I will.
Awesome. Thanks.